Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. All thanks and praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may His peace and blessings be upon His last and final messenger, His family, His companions, and those who follow them until the end of times. So alhamdulillah, last week we were able to cover verses 11 till the end of verse 23. And inshallah tonight the plan is to explore the meanings of verses 24 through 40. So inshallah we'll start off by first reciting the verses themselves. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي أشدد به أزري وأشركه في أمري كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا قال قد أوتيت سؤلك يا موسى ولقد مننا عليك مرة أخرى إذ أوحينا إلى أمك ما يوحى أن اقذفيه في التابوت فاقذفيه في اليم فليلقه اليم بالساحل يأخذه عدو لي وعدو له وألقيت عليك محبة مني ولتصنع على عيني إذ تمشي أختك فتقول هل أدلكم على من يكفله فرجعناك إلى أمك كي تقر عينها ولا تحزن وقتلت نفسا فنجيناك من الغم وفتناك فتونا فلبثت سنين في أهل مدين ثم جئت على قدري يا موسى. So in the last session we learned that Musa alayhi salam had left his family at a particular campsite, and he went to go explore the fire he saw burning on the right side of Mount Tur. And when he got there, he saw something amazing. He saw something extraordinary. He saw that there's this strange fire burning on top of the tree. But this fire, it wasn't causing any part of the tree to actually burn. So none of the leaves, none of the branches has caught fire. So this is a very strange, it's a very unique, it's a very extraordinary sight. And at that moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to him directly. And He bestowed upon him the blessings of prophethood and messengership. So it's at that moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected him and appointed him both as a prophet and a messenger. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him the most fundamental aspects of belief. So this is what we covered last week, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him about the concept of tawheed, that what does it mean to believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He taught him about the concept of ar-risala, of prophethood and messengership. And he reminded him about the concept of al-qiyamah, life after death. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him two unique, two distinct miracles. So the first miracle he was given was that he had a staff. When he would throw this staff on the ground, it would turn into a large serpent, a large snake. And the other miracle that he was given was that when he would put his right hand into his left side and take it out, it would shine like a very bright lamp. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, we did this لِنُرِيَكَ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا الْكُبْرَى, so that we may show you some of our greater signs. Now after selecting him as a prophet and messenger and showing him these two unique miracles, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now tells him what his mission is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now tells him to go to Fir'aun, that go to this tyrannical, this unjust ruler, and invite him towards the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without any partners. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى, that go to Fir'aun, indeed he has transgressed. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is commanding Musa alayhi salam to go to Fir'aun and call him towards belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without any partners. to invite him towards the true religion, the true faith. And then it mentions the reason why he was sent to Fir'aun. إِنَّهُ طَغَى, that indeed he has transgressed. So the verb tagha, it means to exceed the proper bounds, to overstep the limits. It's like an excessive, it's a worst type of oppression, the worst type of dhulm. It also carries the meaning of being tyrannical and oppressive. So Fir'aun had exceeded all the bounds. He had overstepped all the limits in his disbelief and tyranny. He claimed to be the Lord himself. Right? He was so evil, he was so tyrannical, he was so unjust, and he was so deluded by his own power and wealth that he claimed to be a god. He told his people, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, that I am your Lord the Most High, so worship me. So he had done tughyan. He had exceeded all the bounds, all the limits, all the boundaries that could be crossed. And he was the worst possible person you can think of. And that's why his name is used as an example to describe people who are cruel and unjust. So even within the Muslim community, if you want to describe someone who's extremely evil, we'll say that's the Fir'aun of his people. Right? Like nowadays we have some political leaders that we consider them to be similar to Fir'aun because of their oppression, because of their injustice. Right? Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling Musa alayhi salam that it is your responsibility to go and invite him towards Islam. And it's your responsibility, it's your mission to free the people of Bani Israel. So this is a very, very difficult, a very challenging task. And Musa alayhi salam, he understood that he would not be able to do this on his own. That he himself as an individual did not have the ability, did not have the power, did not have the tools to complete this task on his own. And he understood that the only way he would be successful is through the help and assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why in these next few verses we find that he turned towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help in carrying out this responsibility. So he recognized that without the help of Allah, it would be impossible for him to endure and remain steadfast through the difficulties and hardships he was going to face in his mission. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again was sending him to the most powerful ruler on the face of the earth at that time. So Fir'aun at that time was the absolute most powerful individual. He was the most tyrannical and the most obstinate of rulers. He was the most arrogant and severe of all people in his disbelief, and he had the largest army and the most powerful kingdom. So imagine how daunting this task must have seemed, especially to Musa alayhi salam, that I'm sending you to the most powerful individual, one of the richest people who has the most powerful army, and on top of that he's oppressive, he's unjust, and he's extremely cruel. And along with this, Musa alayhi salam had a personal relationship with Fir'aun from before. He was literally the adopted son of Fir'aun. So he lived in his home for a period of time as a child. He stayed in Fir'aun's own room, and he even slept on his bed. And after all this, he killed one of their people, and he feared that they would retaliate by killing him in return. And that's why he had left the city, or that's why he had left Egypt in the first place, to escape from persecution. Now after all this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending him as a warner to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without associating partners with Allah. So again, this is a very difficult scenario, a very difficult situation that he's being placed in. And because it's so difficult, because it's so hard, he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and assistance. And that's one of the main lessons of this passage, that whenever we as human beings are faced with hardships and difficulties, whenever we're faced with a situation that seems like it's impossible, we always turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the concept of tawakkul, of reliance upon Allah, trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the Almighty, the All-Powerful, the All-Knowing, the All-Seeing. And through His help, through His assistance, through His aid, we can overcome any challenge, overcome any difficulty, no matter how large or big it may be. So Musa alayhi salam recognized this, and he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he asked him for 8 things specifically. So he says, قَالَ رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي, that, O my Lord, expand for me my chest. Right? Expand for me my chest. So ishrah sadri. Ishrah is the command from the verb sharaha yashrahu, which can carry several different meanings. Sometimes it means to explain, like sharhun, sharaha yashrahu can mean to explain something. And it can also mean to expand something, to make it expansive, to open it up. And sadr, it translates as the chest, but the commentators mention it's referring to the heart. So Musa alayhi salam, he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to expand and open up his heart, to widen his heart. So sharh al-sadr, it's an Arabic expression that means to open someone's heart, to make it receptive or accepting of something. So he's asking Allah to open up his chest, to open up his heart so that he can receive the knowledge and wisdom of prophethood, and at the same time bear the opposition he'll face in his mission. So when he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to expand his chest, to open his heart, he's asking for strength. Right? He's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep him strong. He's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for courage, to keep him courageous, that he'll be able to face these dangers and these difficulties. He's asking for firmness, for steadfastness, for confidence and patience. So these are the things he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for in order to fulfill his mission, in order to fulfill this responsibility that he has been given. وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي, and make my affair easy for me. That this task you have given me of going and inviting Fir'aun towards Islam and freeing the people of Bani Israel, make this task easy for me. So make it easy for me to undertake this enormous responsibility that has been placed upon my shoulders. And Musa alayhi salam, he understood that as a human being, his own ability or skill or any other apparent cause can't make something easy. That this concept of ease, the concept of being able to do things without any difficulty, that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That alone comes from the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is part of the will and decree of Allah. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised us to always seek Allah's help in whatever we do. Because we as human beings, we're supposed to recognize that in reality we're weak. We are weak human beings. We really don't have the ability or power to do anything without the will, without the decree, without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without the permission of Allah. And that's why we're encouraged that whenever we undertake a task, we're supposed to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help and assistance. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us the following dua, that, "O Allah, be kind to us and make our difficult tasks easy, because it's easy for you to make every difficult thing easy." So this is another lesson, that whenever we're faced with a challenge, and as human beings we're going to face many challenges in life, whenever we face something difficulty, the first being we should turn to is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without a doubt, is going to help us and assist us and aid us. And that doesn't mean we're not going to face challenges. It means those challenges will become bearable. They will become things that we can withhold and withstand in. We can have fortitude and we can persevere through them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling us this dua that Musa alayhi salam made, وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي. And then he says, وَحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. And untie the knot from my tongue, so that they may understand my speech. So this is the third dua that Musa alayhi salam is making to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this dua was to remove the knot from his tongue so that people could understand his message clearly. Now the commentators, the mufassirun, they mention that the knot in his tongue is referring to a slight speech impediment or a lisp that Musa alayhi salam had because of an incident when he was a toddler. So they mention in narration that when he was a toddler, he was burned by a piece of coal, by a burning coal. And because of that, he had this speech impediment, he had this slight lisp. So Musa alayhi salam, he lived in Fir'aun's palace as an adopted child. And it comes in a narration that one day he grabbed Fir'aun's beard and he slapped him across the face. Right? Just as little children, they play, especially if you have a long beard, your kids like to grab onto your beard. Right? And perhaps, children, they don't know what they're doing. So it's saying that Musa alayhi salam, as a small toddler, as an infant, he grabbed Fir'aun by the beard and then he slapped him across the face. And again, Fir'aun, he was a very evil individual. So when this happened, he became enraged, he became angry. And he started to think that perhaps this is the child that was prophesied that's going to bring me down. Right? Perhaps this is the child that was prophesied by Bani Israel that's going to come and conquer and take away my kingdom. So Musa alayhi salam, he did this in complete innocence. He was a toddler, he didn't know what he was doing. But again, Fir'aun was enraged and he started having these suspicions that perhaps this is the child from Bani Israel that will destroy me. So he decided to kill the child. But again, his wife Asya, she stopped him. And she said, "O king, why are you taking this so seriously? He's just a little child who doesn't understand anything. You can test him if you like, and you'll see that he can't tell right from wrong. So Fir'aun, he came up with this plan. He asked for 2 trays to be brought. One of them was filled with burning coal, and the other was filled with rubies and jewel. So Fir'aun expected that the child would be attracted by the brightness of the coals and would not be attracted by the jewelry. That if he's truly an innocent child, he doesn't understand what's going on, he's going to reach for the coals because they look more attractive than that gold and silver. And this would prove that the child was innocent, and what he did was an act of innocence. So when the trays were put in front of Musa alayhi salam, he actually reached for the tray of jewelry. But it's mentioned in the narration that Jibreel turned his hand away and he placed it in the tray of burning coal. So he picked up a piece of burning coal, he placed it in his mouth, and it caused his tongue to burn. And this is what caused the slight impediment in Musa alayhi salam's speech. The uqda, this knot in his tongue, is referring to this slight impediment in his speech. So he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove this knot so that everyone will understand his message clearly. يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. So that when now I speak, when I invite people towards Islam, when I invite people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will understand what I'm saying to them clearly. There won't be any ambiguity, there won't be any doubts, there won't be any suspicions. And one of the lessons that are learned from this, some of the commentators mention, is that eloquence and fluency of expression are essential elements inviting others towards faith. That when inviting other people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is extremely important to be clear in our message, to be open about our beliefs, to make everything very clear and evident towards our audience. So it says, يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي, and then the next thing he asks for is assistance. He asks for help. وَجَعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِّنْ أَهْلِي هَارُونَ أَخِي, and appoint for me a minister from my family, Harun, my brother. So the first 3 du'as that were made by Musa alayhi salam, they were made for himself. That, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expand my heart, expand my chest. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make this affair easy. Remove the knot from my tongue so people understand my speech. And now he's asking for outside assistance, he's asking for help. Something that would help him be successful in his mission. So he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to appoint Harun, his brother, as a helper, and he uses the word wazir. So the word wazir in Arabic, it literally means a person who carries a burden. So the word wazir linguistically, literally, it means anyone who carries a burden. And it's generally translated as minister because a minister carries the burden of responsibility that has been entrusted to him. And some of the narrations mention that Harun alayhi salam was the older brother of Musa alayhi salam. He was about 3 to 4 years older than him, and he passed away maybe 3 years before him. And when Musa alayhi salam made this dua, Harun alayhi salam was still in Egypt. So an angel there was sent to him, informing him that he has been appointed as a prophet and as an assistant to Musa alayhi salam. And this dua, it shows the foresight and care of Musa alayhi salam, that any successful movement requires the selection of dedicated, trustworthy supporters. And that's now another lesson, that when we're going to do something important, we can't do it on our own, right? It's important that we don't try to do things on our own. Rather, we should build a team. We should always work together with others. We should have people with us and surrounding us that will aid us and assist us in what we're trying to do. Especially when it comes to faith and iman and Islam. Especially when it comes to spreading goodness in the community and society. That no human being can do things alone. They always need a group of supporters. They need people who are supporting them and helping them and assisting them. So he chose his brother specifically because he knew the personality of Harun. He recognized his behavior and his aptitude, and he knew that they would work well together and that he would be a huge asset to him in this mission. So then Musa alayhi salam says, the reason why he asked for Harun alayhi salam, Ushdud bihi azri wa ashrikhu fi amri. Increase through him my strength and let him share my task. That the reason why I'm asking for him to be appointed as a minister along with me is so that my affair can be strengthened, so that I can have more support, we can be strong together. Wa ashrikhu fi amri, and make him a partner in my task. So meaning appoint him as my minister so that he can help me, provide support and assistance that will strengthen me and give a greater chance of success. And let him share my task, meaning make him a prophet along with me, so that we both can be partners in this very important and difficult mission. And Musa alayhi salam then mentions the main reason why he wanted Harun alayhi salam as his partner. كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا. That we may exalt you much and remember you much. That together as a pair, right, together as partners, we can exalt your praise a lot. كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا. We can proclaim your tasbih, we can proclaim your glory a lot. وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا. And we can remember you a lot as well. So together, we'll be able to exalt you and proclaim your purity, glorify and praise you. So tasbih, right, this concept of tasbih, again, it means to declare Allah's purity. And that's why oftentimes in English it's translated as glory be to Allah, or exalted is Allah. And what that means is we're declaring Allah's purity, that He is above all needs, He is free from any faults, defects and imperfections, and that absolute perfection belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So when we say Subhanallah, glory be to Allah, we are declaring Allah's perfection. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolutely perfect. He is absolutely unique. He is free from any shortcomings, any faults, any deficiencies, and He does not resemble humanity or creation in any way, shape, or form. So كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا. And together we'll be able to remember you and worship you as well. So one of the famous commentators of the Quran from amongst the Tabi'un, Mujahid rahimullah, he said, a person won't be from amongst those who frequently remember Allah until they remember Allah standing, sitting, and lying. So this part of the dua, it really highlights part of our purpose in life, right? It highlights our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we're supposed to recognize Allah's glory and perfection. And that glory and perfection, once we recognize it, it causes us to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often. It causes us to worship Him and devote ourselves to Him and submit to His will. Now a question comes to mind, that why did Musa alayhi salam ask for his brother Harun to share in his mission if the purpose was simply to glorify and worship Allah? This is something that he could have done alone himself as well. So the reason is because company, the friends a person keeps, the environment, they play a very, very important role in developing a person's character. The environment, the people we surround ourselves with, have a huge influence on the way we speak. They have a huge influence on the way we behave. They have a huge influence on the way we even think about things. So it's important again to surround ourselves with individuals that bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to keep ourselves in a positive environment. So if a person has someone with them to provide help and support, they will be able to fulfill their mission with a greater level of confidence. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he always stressed the importance of keeping good company. So for example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that al-wahdatu khayrun min jalis as-su', that solitude, keeping to yourself, being alone, is better than bad company. وَجَلِيسُ الْخَيْرِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الْوَحْدَةِ. But having good company, having good friends, is better than being alone, it is better than being in solitude. So he's asking that, oh Allah, make Harun, my brother, a minister along with me, strengthen him, or strengthen me through him, so that we can praise you and remember you a lot. Right? إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. This is how he ends his dua. That إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. Indeed you are of us ever seeing. Meaning, oh Allah, please accept these requests of mine, because you are the all-seeing, the all-knowing, and are all aware of my condition and the conditions of others. That you know my strengths and weaknesses, and you know the strengths and weaknesses of Fir'aun. So please accept this dua of mine. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, and He tells him that your dua has been accepted. قَالَ قَدْ أُوتِيتَ سُؤْلَكَ يَا مُوسَى. Allah said, you have been granted your request, O Musa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to his dua, and He tells him that your dua, your supplication has been accepted. So قَالَ قَدْ أُوتِيتَ سُؤْلَكَ يَا مُوسَى. That Allah said, you have been granted your request, O Musa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to his call and told him that you have been granted whatever you asked for. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened his chest, giving him the strength and ability required to carry out his task. He made it easy for him. He removed his speech impediment and made his brother a prophet along with him. So they say that this brings us to the end of one scene, right? One part of Musa alayhi salam's story. And this is the part of the story where he's being made a prophet and messenger, and he's being sent to Fir'aun. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He picked up the story from when Musa alayhi salam was on his way back from Madian to Egypt. Now the surah, it goes back in time. So if you're looking at the story in terms of sequence, in terms of sequential sequence and a timeline, now the surah is going to go back in time, and it tells us events that occurred earlier in his life. So some of the more modern commentators say you can think of this as a flashback, right? The story is at one particular point, and now there's a flashback, and we're being reminded of something that took place even earlier, something that took place in the past. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds him that He has been bestowing His blessings and mercy upon him since he was a newborn child. As a matter of fact, even before his birth. That Musa alayhi salam has been a unique, a special individual even before he came into this world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding him about all of the blessings he received even before becoming a prophet and messenger. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, وَلَقَدْ مَنَنَّا عَلَيْكَ مَرَّةً أُخْرَى. And we had already conferred favor upon you another time. Meaning we have already bestowed blessings upon you even before this. So before this moment, you have been receiving blessings and favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is going to remind him of special favors and blessings He had given him before making him a prophet and answering his dua. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 8 specific blessings. The first is inspiring his mother to place him in a basket in the Nile River. So this is right after the birth of Musa alayhi salam, his mother was inspired to put him in a basket and throw him into the Nile River to protect him and to save his life. The second is placing love for him in the hearts of others. That when Asiya and Fir'aun's soldiers found him, they opened the basket, and as soon as they saw the child, they fell in love with him. The third is divine protection. That throughout his childhood, he was divinely protected from being harmed. The fourth is being returned to his mother. That even though she threw him in the Nile inside of a basket, he was still returned to his mother. The fifth is being saved from punishment for accidentally taking the life of the Coptic. That when he punched the Coptic man and the Coptic man passed away, he was supposed to face the death penalty. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him, protected him from that as well. The sixth is being tested. The seventh is staying in Madian. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to him directly and making him a prophet. That is the 8th blessing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of all these in the next 2 verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّكَ مَا يُوحَى أَنِ اقْذِي فِيهِ فِي التَّابُوتِ فَاقْذِي فِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ فَلْيُلْقِهِ الْيَمُّ بِالسَّاحِلِ يَأْخُذْهُ عَدُوٌّ لِّي وَعَدُوٌّ لَهُ وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِّنِّي وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي. When we inspired to your mother what we inspired, saying, cast him into the chest and cast it into the river, and the river will throw it onto the bank. There will take him an enemy to me and an enemy to him. And I bestowed upon you love from me, that you would be brought up under my eye, under my care. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Musa alayhi salam, remember when we inspired your mother to place you in a basket in the Nile River as a newborn child to protect you from being killed. And remember, no mother, no matter how much she fears for the safety of her child, would throw a newborn child into the Nile River. This is something unimaginable. Right? Imagine this is something very, very difficult upon the mother of Musa alayhi salam. However, Musa alayhi salam's mother was divinely inspired. She was instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do so. إِذْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّكَ مَا يُوحَى. So Fir'aun, he had ordered that all the male children from Bani Israel should be killed. Because he heard about this prophecy, that there's going to be a male child that's born who is going to be made a prophet, and he's going to remove you from your position of power and influence. So when he heard about this, he passed an edict. He passed a ruling that every single male child should be killed. And she was told that in order to save her child's life, she would have to throw him into the river. And at the same time, she was reassured and guaranteed that nothing would happen to him, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would protect him and return him to her. And this divine plan was made known to her through ilham, through inspiration. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places an idea inside of a person's heart and confirms that person in their belief that it's from Allah. And these inspirations are personal and are specific to the people who receive them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired in her heart to cast him into the box, into the chest, and then cast him into the river. أَنِقْذِي فِيهِ فِي التَّابُوتِ فَقْذِي فِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ. So she was inspired to place him in a basket and then to put this basket into the river. And then he reassured her and told her that the river will throw it onto the bank, right? فَيُلْقِهِ الْيَمُّ بِالسَّاحِلِ. That once you put him inside this basket in the river, don't worry, he's not going to drown, he's not going to die, he's not going to pass away. Rather, the river the basket will wash up on the bank of the river. يَأْخُذُ عَدُوٌّ لِي وَعَدُوٌّ لَهُ. And there will take him an enemy to me and an enemy to him. Meaning Fir'aun is the one, and his army and his soldiers are the ones who are going to find this baby. And after placing the basket in the Nile, don't worry or fear, the basket will wash up on the bank of the river, and a mutual enemy will take him. And this is exactly what happened. So the basket washed up on the bank of the river where Fir'aun was sitting with his wife Asiyah. And when they opened the basket and saw an innocent newborn child, they immediately fell in love. Right? وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِنِّي. That as soon as they saw this newborn child, this innocent child, they both fell in love with him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I bestowed upon you love from me, that you would be brought up under my protection. So whenever someone laid eyes upon you, they immediately fell in love with you. And that's why Fir'aun and his wife kept him and took him as their own child. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this elsewhere in the Quran as well. Right? وَقَالَتِ امْرَأَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي وَلَكَ لَا تَقْتُلُوا عَسَىٰ أَن يَنْفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. She said to Pharaoh that he will be a comfort of the eye for me and for you. So do not kill him, perhaps he may benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son. And this was done so that Musa alayhi salam would be raised under the care and protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the blessings, this is one of the favors that Allah bestowed upon Musa alayhi salam. That even as a newborn child, he was under this divine care, this divine protection, these divine favors and blessings and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds him that even when he was in the river, he was being protected. So he says, إِذْ تَمْشِي أُخْتُكَ فَتَقُولُ هَلْ أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى مَنْ يَكْفُلُ فَرَجَعْنَاكَ إِلَى أُمِّكَ كَيْ تَقَرَّ عَيْنُهَا وَلَا تَحْزَنْ وَقَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا فَنَجَّيْنَاكَ مِنَ الْغَمِّ وَفَتَنَّاكَ فُتُونًا فَلَبِثْتَ سِنِينَ فِي أَهْلِ مَدْيَنَ ثُمَّ جِئْتَ عَلَى قَدَرِي يَا مُوسَى. And we favored you when your sister went and said, shall I direct you to someone who will be responsible for him? So we restored you to your mother, that she might be content and not grieve. And then you killed someone, but we saved you from retaliation and tried you with a severe trial. And you remained some years among the people of Madian. Then you came here at the decreed time, O Musa. So in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's alluding to a few other events that took place before he was appointed as a prophet and messenger. So he alludes to how his sister followed the basket in the Nile and then offered to find someone who could nurse the child. It alludes to the story of his accidentally taking the life of the Coptic, as well as many other trials and tribulations. وَفَتَنَّاكَ فُتُونًا. And this is a very, I guess you could say, a powerful part of the verse. Right? وَفَتَنَّاكَ فُتُونًا means we placed you in several difficult trials. We have put you through many fitan. And there's a long narration that's mentioned in the Tafsir of Ibn Kathir that highlights all of these different trials and tribulations that Musa alayhi salam experienced. So in order to understand the full context of these trials, it's important to understand the entire story of Musa alayhi salam, which has been narrated in the Tafsir of Ibn Kathir. And inshallah, that's what we're going to cover next week. Right? So next week, we'll cover this entire narration that details the life of Musa alayhi salam, from the moment of his birth all the way until he's appointed as a prophet and messenger. And when we read that narration, we'll have a full picture, we'll have a full idea of all the trials and difficulties that Musa alayhi salam faced, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continuously protected him and saved them from it. And the reason why we're being told all of this is to use this as an example, that this is a real practical example for us to take lessons from, especially for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was facing opposition from the people of Quraysh. He was facing challenges and difficulties and hardships. So through this story, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is consoling and comforting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we're similar people to you in the past who had to face much more difficult scenarios than you. They had to go through even more difficult trials and tribulations, but because they were upon the truth, because of their faith, because of their iman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them and protected them. And the same thing goes for us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always continue to protect us and save us as long as we have that faith, as long as we glorify Him, as long as we remember Him, and more importantly, as long as we turn to Him for help. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who read the story of Musa alayhi salam and understand it, but more importantly, derive beneficial lessons from it so we can implement them into our daily lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our faith firm and strong. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to expand our chests as well. This is a common dua that we're taught to make, that, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expand our chest, make it open for accepting faith and tawakkul and all of these beautiful qualities and characteristics. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our affairs easy for us, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us firm upon the path of faith. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the Quran a proof for us, not a proof against us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst the people of the Quran, those who read it, understand it, and more importantly, act upon it. Alright, any questions from these particular verses? Go ahead. It was just a prophecy. Like, so within Banu Israel, they had like different, they had a religious tradition, and within that religious tradition, they were told about a prophet that was going to come and save them. Yeah. So Fir'aun knew about this, and he learned about it. He says, you know what? I'm going to stop this from happening. Similar. It's similar. It's like a really, really excessive form of evil. Yeah. Yeah, so he was still in Egypt when he asked this dua. Yeah. They were already believers. They were already believers from Banu Israel. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was yeah. So I think it was after Harun's birth, because he was older. And once he learned about it, he says, we'll slaughter every male child every other year initially. So it might have been that he was in the year that, yeah, that was saved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So part of our creed is we believe in this concept known as ilham. So it's more of like a deep foresight, a deep insight. Yeah. It's similar to intuition. It's similar to intuition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It could be to any individual that they get inspired with this like idea, this thing in it, and they're like they're adamant about doing it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Part of his courage and strength, right? Basically expand my chest to make me strong and courageous and patient as well. That's all included in Sharh al-Sadr. Ah, definitely. ويكون إن شاء الله. Alright. It's about 3 to 4 years. Yeah. So yeah, they knew they were brothers. Yeah, yeah. He knew that as a young child. But it was just for nursing purposes. So he was still living in the palace with Fir'aun, but his mother took him back to nurse him and take care of him. So she became kind of like the nanny for him, anyways. No, it was within the city. Yeah, all the wrong stuff. Yeah, grabbed him by the beard. Yeah, he was angry at him. He was upset with him. Yeah, yeah. Alhamdulillah. Exactly, exactly. It's a good du'a to make part of your regular rotation. Alhamdulillah. It's a du'a we should learn basically. Alright, may Allah accept us from us and place on our scale of good deeds of the judgment. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallah bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.